Good evening. Thank you again for your patience. I call to order the special meeting, May 15, 2014, of the Board of Commissioners. First item is the approval of the agenda. First and second, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item number 3 is new business. Discuss and or take action on City of Fairview budget for fiscal year 2014-2015. Mr. Daugherty.
Thank you. The Finance Committee met earlier. I was taking care of payroll and was not able to make that meeting. But I would like for we've all kind of been working 3 sets of books, and the numbers as far as Miss Donna Burke, she's been running her spreadsheet. I've been running my spreadsheets, and I think we all have pretty much the same conclusion as far as sales tax. And I'm going to let Mr. share with the finance committee.
We really have 3 suggestions to the board that we would like to make recommendations. And we did not prepare a separate budget because the financial officer, I knew he was going to prepare this and give it, and it would just confuse us to have 3 or 4 different worksheets to work off of. So, or at least it would confuse me, maybe the rest of you guys. So our suggestions are suggestions that we believe can be applied to the work that the financial officer has given us.
Excuse me a minute, point of order. Are we allowed to take recommendations from the Finance Committee under this subtitle, under this agenda item?
If it has relevance to what you're considering, you can, because you're saying discuss the budget. And if it's relevant to the budget, if they then assume what they discussed was relevant to the budget, then you can. If it's not relevant to the budget, then you can't.
And understandably is relevant to the budget, but it's not for recommendations from the Finance Committee. Do you think that agenda item is clear enough?
Let me look at the agenda, see how broad it is. If those recommendations would have an effect on your budget discussion, then I think it would be proper.
Okay, excuse me, Mr. Vassell, continue.
Yes, ma'am. So we really have 3 things that we think the board should consider in terms of setting the stuff. And I'll kind of go at them a little bit from behind here. We are under current contract. One of the things that has really thrown our budget out of whack for this fiscal year, it has been our health reimbursement program for our employees. We met with Tim from the benefits place, and we looked at various alternatives, and we are convinced as a committee that making a change until the contract runs out in November would not be to the best advantage of the city. Most of that HRA money has already been spent, and if we started over with a new program beginning July 1st, we would in essence move up 4 months the timing of that again. So it's best to let it run in November. Now, the second part of that suggestion is we have to make a change. We are basically putting ourselves in the hole in a dramatic fashion by continuing to offer a program that's really paramount to nobody's. I mean, it's so far ahead of everybody else's program in terms of what we're reimbursing and how much we're paying. And there are some slight adjustments that can be made at that time, and we can enter into a different contract that's a short-term contract from, say, November to June of next year, so that we get on the same cycle as our fiscal year. That's one of the things that we think, since it's running now half and half, it creates a problem in terms of managing our finance and our costs. So our suggestion in that is that there's not really anything we can do right now other than continue on with that until November. But in November, we need to look hard at the benefits program, because we, again, there are some adjustments that can be made that won't impact anybody too negatively, but we've got to do something or we're going to drive ourselves broke from that.
Isn't that line item 522 and 519? And is there anything else that's included in that?
It's line item 519 is the actual cost of the insurance contract, and 522 is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Where we had budgeted $60,000, but we anticipate spending $156,000.
Okay, that was one of my stars, so I appreciate.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate you clearing that
We've
up.
got to do something there, because we're basically offering a policy that nobody in the world offers. And when we started it, it was a good thing, but our workforce has changed, and we're just basically, we can't pay 100% of the medical for our employees anymore. But now is not the time to do it, because we've already paid the money. If we start over again, we're only going to make our problem worse. We need to wait until November till the contract's up. We according to the information provided us by Blue Cross Blue Shield, we are at 151, a rating of 1.51, which means for every dollar they've taken in, they've paid out $1.51 to our employees. And then we, on top of that, have paid $160,000 on top of that. And the employee rate is, for a family, is around $150 a month, which is just low.
So what we're going to have to look at is changing benefits, not necessarily changing premium, is that right?
Well, we're going to have
Possible changing premium too.
a slight change in premium, but not a lot in premium, not a lot in the Blue Cross benefits. What we're going to have to look at is, of that $4,000 deductible, right now, we pay the first $3,000 of that. And that's not working for us. It's putting us in the hole. But there's nothing that the committee does not believe there's anything we can do at this particular time. It would serve no purpose. It would actually hurt us to try to make the change midstream. The claim rate could change, and we could actually get a break on the rate if our claims came down between now and then. Plus, we've probably already spent all the HRA money. So now we're entering the part that the insurance is paying for it. So we're actually helping Blue Cross if we terminate now. Okay. That was the first item that we wanted to put forth to the board. The second item that we want to put forth to the board is that we believe that operating expenses wise, that we should be looking at doing two things. First, we should be looking at setting a mark at somewhere around 80% of those categories that are not employee related. And that in addition to setting at 80% those categories, and by employee related, I mean salaries, insurance, and also you've got utilities, stuff that is outside of our control per se. And then we are in favor of having a spending allotment on top of the budget reduction. In other words, take for instance category A for Department A. Say there's $10,000 was spent last year, then their actual annual allocation would be $8,000, but that's to last them the entire year. So unless it's an immediate need, like the fire department has an immediate need to outfit the Quinn or we can't use it, but say it's something like just general office supplies, then our recommendation is that it be allocated to such that it corresponds with the year. So if you are going to allocate on a quarterly basis, then if you're going to exceed of the remaining of the $8,000 allocation, if you're going to exceed $2,000, then you need to discuss that with the city manager and/or the CFO before you exceed that. So that $8,000 isn't spent in the first quarter, and then we're having to cover that the rest of the year. So it is an allocation to meet the budget requirements of 80% of those operating type things. But there is also, I don't want to call it a cap, but it's a structured spending plan that allows us to make sure that whatever we did allocate gets us to the end of the year, unless Chief Executive Management decides that it's okay for them to go ahead and spend $3,000 because the copy machine broke or something to that effect. So those are our general recommendations as consensus from the committee. We each have some ideas about, other things that we can do, but those principles are what we believe will help us in terms of changing our spending patterns to put our spending in line with our general revenue. So, any questions of me about those?
I have a question for Tom. Just some general questions, being that I'm reviewing on Oktoberfest online in your revenues. There was something over the last couple years for that. This is just going to be some general questions for clarity, please. Is there a thought that that's not going to take place? Is there a thought that that may not raise money? What was the... Keith? It's $4,500 for the last 2 years, so was just curious what was the thought of the department on that?
We were asked to make cuts, and that's what we did. So we're not doing the haunted trails. We still will be doing the Family Fall Fun Day. We recouped that money, so we have not lost, and that's $1,500.
But you've not added the Family Fun Day?
We just put it in lieu of, because we combined basically two events into the Haunted Forest, which I think is how it's labeled on the budget line item there.
Am I missing it, or is it
318 is now Family Fun Day instead of Haunted Trails.
3?
18 on expense sheet, on the expense sheet.
Okay, so no estimated on revenues.
Right, there'll be no revenue,
318.
where it says is now. Family.
Expense, 1,500, I see it.
That's what it costs us to run it. If I understand.
Okay.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure if that event was not being looked at, or if we needed to get sponsorship. If it was
And-
something you wanted to continue, did we need to be focusing on sponsorship?
And that may be something we look at too, if we could fund, getting funding from another source or something that would do 100% of the funding.
And also,
may-
your department has kind of changed those events. It would be good as far as what you think is better for the community, and then what is a better way to project that particular time, which is fall. So maybe your Family Fall Fun is taking place of that event because it's more popular, maybe?
Yeah, it's grown pretty big in numbers the 2 years that we've had it so far. So
Okay.
we believe that's a good one, get the young kids out there and get some of the community involved with it, so.
Okay, great, thank you. Go ahead.
I have one thing, we were talking, we would like to get to the point where we're hosting events, not necessarily funding events, and we would like to,
Okay. Online item, the revenue 36,962, the transfers from facilities tax. It says 77,000. That's transferring in as,
yes, my sole purpose was to pay this note.
Okay, and skipping along to debt service,
What note was that?
the City Hall.
Okay, I didn't see.
He said this
Okay.
being City Hall, sorry. Looking ahead at debt service, then I'll ask the question there, if debt service on City Hall is proposed 81,000 and interest rate, the interest on that is 22,000, the numbers are not making sense, but I'm sure there's some sense to it. Talk to me about that.
There is a stipulation that we only pay.
And with that said, where is the 22,000 coming from, being that the note on this was to come from facilities tax?
22,000 has to come from general reserve. But then it should be, to be perfectly correct, at 77,000. Shall 81,000.
Tom, is that how it was done before you got here, or is this something
I don't know.
you don't know?
Well, the facility tax from tracking, and anyone please input if you have difference, but it was always right around the note, and then it started going down because it's interest. Isn't there's an interest in there that went down, the amount paid? Well, I'm asking you, and you're going, I don't know.
Interest on the lower principal would reduce that number, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, and then that note was 108,000 when I started, and then the account was going down, and I remember us having full discussion about what happens when the facility tax money is no longer enough to cover the note, which was let's say, well, when we borrow this money, we're going to make sure the facility tax pays it. And that was years ago agreement. So I remember a couple years ago us having the conversation of when that money, that account is not enough to carry it, what are we going to do with the overage? So I'm not real sure that, without all the records, I'm not real sure how that panned out for this year.
There's a $51,000 transfer within, into the budget. And, that's my knowledge, it was.
Okay.
Mayor, I'm sorry, can I ask everybody to speak up a little bit when that fan is on? Because I know that it's harder for them to hear out there with it on.
Did you find where there was a budget amendment for that?
No, I believe that was in the original, in fact, I know it was, I looked it up, it was in the original, budget ordinance.
I have another question on the debt service piece, and these are just notes as I studied on it, so they're kind of random, but on the debt service page, you've got the fire trucks, the interest for the fire truck, City Hall, and the interest for City Hall, police cars, and the interest for police cars. Then you have the road loan interest of $19,571. Where is the loan for the road, or is it an interest-only loan?
Should be in here. That, yes, it comes out of State Street Aid, that 931 is the loan. And then the interest would be 616.
616, the line item of 19,571.
Yes.
So we're paying principal and interest.
Yes.
Okay, that was
Now,
my
I do
big
know on the State
question.
Street Aid, I can pay both out of the State Street Aid. 100% on that.
Because it had two different titles, I just needed to clarify it wasn't left off. I'm going to turn the floor back to you if you'd like to discuss the information you shared with us on this new two-pager. And thank you for putting the expenditures in an inclusive. That was one of my notes to ask for also.
Yes. Did everybody get this handout? The 2013-14, 2014-15. You have to, I apologize for being new to governmental budgeting. I've had quite a bit of education in a short amount of time, but still, when doing this, it's just like that 7781. That was an oversight, and I don't think I made too many.
Well, that's why it's called a draft, and that's why it's called we're discussing. That's a good place to be.
One thing that I've been looking at strongly, and I feel like Miss Brooks and Mr. Hall and Commissioner Bissell, we've all been watching the sales tax. And every about the 14th or 15th, everybody's asking me, how did it do? And it came in today. And I did get another bump. So I feel like it's looking up as far as that goes. If you just to give you an idea, we were averaging $65,000 a month on county shared sales tax pre-Walmart. And then since Walmart, it's gone up 25,000 in January, 27,000 in February, and then for March it came up 43,000. So we brought in 95,000 from the county, and then also on the state shared part of it, it's been averaging 30, and it jumped up to 42 and some change. So I was very, it's not the 100,000 a month that projection we're looking for, but at least it's creeping on up. But I don't think, to me, I don't know. I think a lot of numbers are put in place with anticipation of some of these numbers, and I'm just for me personally, until I see it, I have a hard time projecting it, and I know that's just the way I'm wired, and I think probably there's some numbers that you can put that number in there, and I hope it goes. But I will be honest and say I am concerned about cash flow, and I don't mind being tight, and I don't mind being close to the vest, and I hope. I think we'll do that no matter what, but I guess my biggest concern is all the departments have cut until it hurts, and I feel like everybody, I've gone to Chief Harris twice, said, where can we cut? And he said, I'm done, I can't. And then, and same everywhere, and I've gone to them 5 or 6 times, and so, I guess what I'm trying to say is this is my perspective. I need some cash, and I think some infusion of some development and some activity in this town will do a lot for the budget. Now, with that being said, we're so close. If you don't mind, my budget is not quite balanced, as you can see. I'm showing a $412,000 shortfall for next year. And I did increase those sales tax numbers in the revenues before I printed these off. Now, I'd like if Commissioner Massell would like to share his sales tax predictions, I just, I don't have the knowledge that he has as far as that goes. But I think we're in a good position as far as everything's just right on the horizon, waiting to pop, and then it just hadn't totally come to fruition. And I'm not sure what the timetable is. But Commissioner Massell, would you like to share your
If
revenues?
that's okay with the rest of the board.
I'd like to hear.
We didn't get a chance to fully vet these in the finance committee today. We kind of got our timing crossed and stuff. But there is a couple of things that I think are still represent a conservative way to look at things, but provide us with a little more accurate perspective of what the future might hold. And so, and it mainly goes around the sales tax. And I would recommend that we look at what we collected in all other taxes besides the sales tax and just use that as our base rollover. And that really comes to about 2.75. So everything but the 3 sales tax categories, we just roll over what we actually got this year. So any increases to those only improves our position. But that is a very conservative approach. Most city governments, based upon my research, always increase 2 to 5% to count for growth. We need to gain some money back in our reserve. So if we go zero in terms of growth, then any excess that comes in will be available to us to go back into the reserve. Now, where it comes to sales tax, I think you could take the sales tax that we collected for May, which is actually March's sales tax, and we could use that number and multiply that by 12. And that's going to give us plenty of money to do this because Tom just said we've got $50,000 extra dollars per month in there. 4 times 12, that's $600,000 extra dollars, which eliminates the gap. I don't think that's reasonable. I think some of that may have been how we got to where we are today. It dropped off and that created a problem. But I also don't think it's as reasonable to say that the current situation in this fiscal year is the same as it's going to be in the future. So what I was going to offer to my fellow finance committee folks, and I offer now to y'all, is that in terms of projecting the 3 sales tax categories, we use a 6-month average, not an entire year average. We go back and use the December through May receipts. And that gives us some of the Walmart money, but it also gives us pre-Walmart money. So we're not relying on that. We just use the 6 months, which I think is a better average than going back for an entire year. And that allows us to balance the budget in terms of the 80% after those necessary items, stay in business items, utilities, salaries, those types of things. That allows us to balance the budget. Whereas either by not making the cuts and or going with the lower sales tax using what we collected last year in sales tax, we put ourselves in almost a draconian position where we have to cut to 53% in order to balance.
So with that, the line 31,610, just as an example to what you've said, in revenues would read 909?
Well, it could read 909 if you did exactly what was last year's. That's what's projected. So that's what, if you took last year's sales tax.
But is that example of what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying don't do that, But I'm also not saying take March, which was up high for 50-something thousand. I'm not saying take that either, because that's liable to put you in a over. I'm saying take 6 months, the period December, actual receipts for December through May. And take that 6 months average and multiply that by 12. Because I think that's a better picture of what our current condition is, not a slanted one way or the other. It's not too optimistic, it's not too conservative, it's kind of right down the middle.
So with that particular line item, do you have a estimate of what your annual revenues would be on your
Yes,
6 months?
yes, be 2.4 million. So that our annual revenue from our taxes, property tax, sales tax, and other general revenue would be 5.2 million.
You added, at that 2.4, you added all those three components, okay?
Yeah.
I was looking just in that particular item, line item, where would be the difference of the percentage of the change? So do you have that broke down as the county taxes, or are they all three
No,
together?
I didn't do it.
That's okay, that's okay, we're just.
What I did was I added up the rolling average based upon what we know from December to May of what we've received. And I added those three categories up and took that average and multiplied it by 6. And that gave me divided it by 6, I'm misspeaking. I took the sum total, divided it by 6, that gave me a 6-month monthly average, which I then multiplied by 12, that monthly average by 12, and then rounded it. That's how I came up to 2.4.
And that would be interesting to see, but it would also be interesting to see if we flatlined last year's revenues and what that would look like.
That means you're gonna have to cut you're gonna have to cut 47% from every one of the budgets out there in order to.
And there's a healthy percentage, as you said, too far to one side, too far to the other. There is a healthy percentage that can be considered conservative or reasonable. So where that happy number is, I think we have opportunity to not fluff it, watching, knowing that we're escalating and that's not where we want to go.
Right.
I agree.
If I may,
Go ahead.
I think it's very conservative and wise about what you're talking about doing, because sales taxes derive from revenue from retail sales. We all pretty much know that. And the season that we've just gone through, the months that you're talking about counting, were not of the high end of retail sales, especially with the Walmart and the different things that are coming together. Their high ends, November through December. And I've heard it's as
think
much
the
as
last 6
30% of their
months.
annual sales. So we didn't get that this time. We know we're gonna get that next time, which is, I think it's what he's trying to say, is we don't count it because we're just going back for the last 6 months. And I think it's very conservative considering moving forward, what we're gonna end up getting. So I think it sounds pretty good.
Commissioner Carroll?
I think it sounds dangerous. I feel like that this is kind of where we're at because we use projections of line items that we didn't yet have. Walmart has only been open, we only have 3 months projections. So to take a 6-month span from December to, starting in December when the sales tax has already, increased. I just worry about going down a road. I do believe, like I believed last year, that Walmart was coming, we'll have an increase of sales tax. But I just think it's, dangerous. I think it's time for us to make cuts. I feel like we've had an inflated budget for too long, and we're going to have to make cuts. It's great if the money comes in, we can amend the budget, we can do what we need to do. But to be fiscally responsible, we need to take a look at what we can cut. And I know it's hard for these departments because they depend on this money, but what's going to happen? We don't have a reserve like we used to. So what's going to happen if we have another year like this and it just didn't happen like we budgeted? So I really think we need to take a different approach. I think we don't include the line items. We look at more things we can cut. Then if it comes down and y'all have another suggestion of maybe not, even though I'm against using the 3 months that we have of Walmart money, I could come to agreement because at least we have a line item to compare to. But I just think it's the hard time to find ways to cut. And that's the only option.
What if, I agree, commented of what you had mentioned a moment ago in the sales items. If we add it, it's kind of in between what both of you are saying. If we add it on what we have actuals, we know the increase, as what Commissioner Sutton mentioned, could be the season ahead. So I think being able to look at it with either the 3 months of the seasoned confirmed money, and then, of course, I looked at it as what if we looked at the exact line item of last year's revenues, and you said that would give us a deficit of what?
47?
Well, in order to balance the budget, you'd have to cut 47% of everything that was not personnel, utilities, stay in business stuff. So if you had a line item of $10,000 on office supplies, that now would become $5,300. It's just, I agree with Commissioner Carroll that on all but one point. The projections for Walmart, it's not that we got to where we were before and then our Walmart projections put us in the deficit. We didn't get to where we were before. So Walmart really, the fact that we were counting on that may have made it worse in terms of the deficit, but it did not. Our problem, if you look at prior year in income, you can see that sales tax just did not go up very much in terms of anything across the board. And then we had other categories that ate that up by not going up hardly at all or by reversing, like the court fines and stuff like that. That stuff dropped. So it really wasn't, she makes a great point. We've got to cut, but it's not so much the Walmart projections that put us this way. It was a combination of extra expenses that we weren't budgeted for on top of just some general revenue falling short. Now, having said that, I think we have to be more conservative. I came up with 6 months because it was some of the old and some of the new. The more of the new you use, you get a higher projection, but you also run a higher risk. And but it's really not fair not to use some of the months that we had prior to the Walmart, especially since that would include a normal Christmas season, for lack of a better term. That's why I went all the way, said 6 months back to December, because the December monies would be what a normal Christmas would be around here. Now, we've never experienced a Walmart Christmas. We don't know what that means. But when you talk to the folks at Walmart, they tell you, obviously, that's their boomtown season. So we don't know what that means here. So I agree with Commissioner Carroll. We don't need to be projecting that and including that. So we use what our previous experience was on our own Christmas season. We add to that what our current experience is with the small increase that we've seen. And together, if you use a 6 months average, that's how I got there. So, I mean, you can use a 9 month average. I think using just last year's revenue, we're creating a bigger problem for ourselves than we really have. I think using the just what we got this month and multiplying that by 12, then we really put ourselves in a bind and the risk goes up. So where's the middle? And to me, that was 6 months. That's how I came up with the suggestion of 6 months.
Do y'all remember what Walmart's projections was for us? Then Crystal sat there and gave us,
456,000.
400.
We went with 500, I mean, we went with 248
right, it was around
It was
250.
half, we went about
Yeah.
half of what they
Okay.
projected.
for something.
So we can pretty much say the 250,000 is part of our shortfall. If you take what Tom gave us, the 112,624 plus the 412,117, add those together, came with 524,741, sorry. So you could pretty much say, take the 250,000, and see that only 250 was from the other stuff, the income not coming in, do you see what I'm saying?
No.
Okay, well, if you add, I pretty much took a.
You can't add the 2 years together because we as a city have to deal with each year individually. We
Right.
cannot have multi-year budgets.
Okay, okay.
So,
So you take the
let-
412,000, let's add this, okay? If you take what he gave us as a shortfall and you subtract the 250 it was Walmart money that we projected in, then we really wouldn't have had that much of a shortfall, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's the future budget. If you look at the 13-14, which is the one we're in.
Right.
He projects a 112,000 shortfall. We have $100,000 more spent on HRA than we budgeted for.
Gotcha.
And we have $100,000 less in traffic fines. That's a $200,000 swing. If we had gotten in HRA, we had gotten what we budgeted for, just the 60,000, that would have saved us, we would be in an $80,000 surplus. And that's Walmart as it is. So I get what you're saying in principle, the data just doesn't take me there. I get a different conclusion. And that's part of why I'm offering the 6 months, is that has a little of the Walmart in it, but only the startup Walmarts. It's not even a full month's Walmart.
Okay, so let's go back to the insurance plan. Let's say we go back and fix that. Do you already have a plan in place? I mean, how do you know how much we're going to be able to save? Are we going to be able to make that up, I mean, without taking employees' benefits and cutting them?
Well, that's something that we will have to look at specifically. It'll be whatever we want to fund. For instance, if we want to raise the current premium for an individual from $32 a month to $50 a month, which is $18, a month raise on their current, not change their policy at all. It's just an $18 a month raise. Over the course of a year's time, that'll save us $20,000.
So if
So
they,
it's just by swapping premium, well, not just on individuals, but you have to do that on groups too, to get the 20. But there are ways that we can make those decisions that will reduce the deficit for the coming year. It's not going to help us with this year. This year's already gone.
okay, go ahead.
Part of what you asked, this might help. What is the current budget as of June 30th? I don't really have anything, and I know we're discussing next year's budget, but what is the current budget of June 30th numbers?
This year, my best prediction is at 519, 522, what you were talking about earlier.
So you're saying,
The printed was a little bigger.
Yeah. We have to magnify.
I'm showing us at 361, 716 for medical insurance premiums and 521 on HRA, so you add those two together for your total insurance cost. Now, you have to go in and back out the deductions from the payroll deductions to get your total cost, and those are here, if you want to get
Where's here?
it's on the revenue side.
Yeah.
36739, no, it's 36750. So I'm predicting 77,000.
Okay, and let me go a step further. At the end of June 30th at the budget, are you showing a surplus or a shortfall? June 30th, 2014?
For the,
No, for the full
13, 14
budget.
budget altogether.
yeah, this is showing 112,624.
Shortfall.
If we ended today, what would it be? Okay.
What percentage of the property taxes have we completely collected?
Based on what we budgeted, 93%, based on what we billed, 98%.
Okay, so 93% is what we've collected. 7% equals how much? 7% would equal how much?
$80,000.
Okay. I mean, that's just a number that I was, if you end today, you can't just end it today. It's got to be, and that, you won't get full collection on that.
Right.
So even go back to the insurance, we went over 96,000. You're projecting that next year's costs will be 100 and the medical reimbursement 100,000. But this year's was actually 156. Is that with the intent of what it would be when you change the medical plan? It's going back, I'm looking at line 522 and,
519. My main concern is getting something that is manageable, that I've got which, and I'm talking total, I'm talking gross. I don't want to, the biggest thing, and then we alluded to it about the way we have it set up now, is between enrollment period to enrollment period, you can have a 25-30% increase in your premium, depending on how your claims are running. And so, everybody changes their plan based on how the claims are going. And so we had a run, as he stated earlier, of high claim activity. And
If I can just a little bit of input, really has nothing to do with this budget. We're going to have to look at cutting the first $3,000. It's pure and simple. So that's part of it right there. An employee can handle that part and manage it much better than they can manage a large premium increase at a time. And I think that's where our money's coming from, is us paying that first $3,000. Is that pretty close? I think if we manage that part of it, that will come into order like it should be. Along with the claim ratio, because that will reduce the claim ratio dramatically, and then we have to pay our part. Is that correct?
should have an effect on the claim ratio, and also I believe we'll keep our.
I think so. The whole thing will cut
Where we are.
dramatically on there.
Adjustments we on HRA.
And that was just in reply to the question about what's going to happen in the future come November, how we're going to manage it. I think that's going, from what I've looked at on here and looked at the insurance thing too, I think that's very likely that that's going to happen. We're going to have to make that cut.
well, I'm not saying that I'm opposed. I mean, that's definitely one area we can look, but I worry about the quality of service. But it's not that huge of a savings from what I'm calculating. You know, so I'm with you. That's a good place to start looking, but where else can we do other cuts? And then also, we just have to be careful that, you know, also that we are given a decent coverage.
Just a question while he's there, 'cause I don't know the answer to this question. What did we pay out as far as the pre-deductible part of it? The first 3,000? 100%? And how many dollars was that so far?
I don't have today figure, I have a projection figure of 156.
So if we reduce that by 1,000, we'd reduce it by 30%, which would be over $56,000 just for that. So that's a pretty good chunk.
And we're not,
Well, but he's budgeting that already
Right.
reduced.
Right.
I mean, according to your expense sheet, you're already saying next year's premium will be $56,000 less.
But we're not talking about premium resources. We're talking about city-funded part of the $3,000.
The reimbursement, I'm
You're
sorry, I
right.
used the wrong word.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So it's not like from where we're at now, we're going to save the 56. He's already cut that 56 in the budget as presented today. It's not a future gain. He's already cut it on the budget.
I don't,
Yeah, look on line 522 on the second page.
budgeted 100,000.
And you're projecting this year to finish out at 156, so you're already taking that cut in the budget
How
presented.
did-
It's
how
not
did
like
you-
there's more money to cut.
how did you take that cut?
Talked to Tim White, and we're going to get it worked out.
In the premium structure?
The whole plan structure, it's all together, the HRA and we may do a percentage plan, we may do, have it layered where the employee responsible, the city
Okay.
responsible, and they do, when they may do a percentage all the way across the whole deductible, there's infinite numbers of ways to get it there.
And still maintain a decent plan for the employees?
Yes,
Okay.
rock solid. Not 100%.
Mayor, if I could. So I just have a few more things here that might be of interest. or
Go ahead.
not. It's just left up to y'all if you want to hear. In looking at the revenue, we have revenue that is available to us to be transferred in. The 77,000 we've already talked about, the facilities tax to pay the note. 26,000 from the drug fund to pay the expenses around the drug dog and stuff like that.
Excuse me, the 77 is not the full note. There's still a $22,000.
Right, but we're going to have to pay that out of general revenue. The interest is our responsibility. The 77,000 is we can take from the facilities tax.
So for this year, you're talking for
The coming year,
for projection.
projection. All this is about the coming year.
Okay.
And then we have $26,000 worth of expenses that can be put into the drug fund exclusive of the cars. I'm not talking about any equipment. And then we have $125,000 in street aid that's a bookkeeping injury, but it does reduce the liability there because we no longer have that money in that fund. Street aid replenishes itself. We get about $130,000 a year in street aid, so it'll replenish itself during the year. That gives us total revenue of, if we bring those three things in, of 54, according to my rounding of figures, 5478. And Tom, these have not been sanity tested by Tom, so that's why they're not exact. But $5,478,000. Now, if we take the following steps, we can reduce the deficit down to what I see to be $158,000. And these are the following steps. One of them Tom's already alluded to, and that is cap the HRA for planning purposes at $100,000. Hopefully it'll come in less than that, but that means what we are buying into is to change that come November, or we'll have to put money back in it. A complete 50% cut on all allocations for computer and office equipment.
Is that all in admin, or does each department have their
Each department
own?
has some, but a 50% cut. The police department has asked for 4 cars, 2 of which can be paid for the drug fund, 2 of which would have to come out of general revenue. We would allow them to go ahead and buy the ones out of the drug fund, because there is money there to pay for those. The 2 that would have to come out of general revenue, we just have to wait until we see if we can afford those, based upon revenue. Equipment and,
What savings, I'm sorry, Commissioner, what savings was that? I was down to 5428 after the 50-something thousand savings. What was the office equipment going to save us?
Was it office equipment or office supplies?
no, office equipment. Actual computer equipment and office equipment.
What figure would be attached to that?
I didn't itemize it out,
Okay.
Tony. These are just,
Okay.
I'll have to go back and get all my worksheets to do that. But then from the current budget as you see it here, Tom's worksheets, you take $62,000 from parks and/or highways and streets. So you don't buy any equipment and/or vehicles unless you can take them from their particular reserve fund. So if you do all of that, then you come up with a deficit of $158,000, and you can cut 20, excluding salaries, taxes, utilities, insurance, and services that we have to have, like data processing, the internet, those contracts that we have to have. If you take everything that's left and take a 20% cut in it over what we spent this year, you'll save $160,000, which is $2,000 more than what you're running your deficit.
Could you email that for our review, please?
Sure,
Because
I'd be happy.
we all tried to write down, but I
No,
think it would
I'd
be
I'd
helpful if
happy
you
to.
emailed that for us to
You know,
review.
And then you say, well, what about that laundry list of things that when we went through and we asked each division what they need? And we can afford those, we just have to afford them from their respective reserved account. In other words, 2 of the police cars can come from the drug fund. There's money in the drug fund.
He's already been permission to buy them.
Or one last
One,
year.
we would have to give him the other, but he's fixing to surplus some cars out here that'll add back to, there's money there in the drug fund. The list from half of Keith's department, the parks, there's money in the Bowie Park Fund to pay for that stuff. The streets, there's money, or will be money in street aid when that comes in to pay for that stuff. And then our school gift and our library money is in the school facilities tax. So those big ticket items, you don't buy any of that stuff out of general revenue. You buy that stuff out of those specialized categories. Yes, the balance is going to go down in those reserves, but as the balance goes down in the reserves, you get the equipment that these divisions need, and you limit our liability at the end of the year to have X amount of money in there.
Do you have a fund balance sheet, kind of a summary? Because he's speaking of spending all this money, and that indirectly affects the reserve, to where when you get to a deficit, you need that reserve, so you don't want to spend it too quick.
Well, but this money, it can't be used for just bailout of the deficit. This money has to be used, each of these categories has to be used for a specific purpose. In other words, we couldn't take the $240,000 or whatever it is in the Bowie Park Fund and spend that money to offset police salaries.
Oh, I understand that.
So we're going to spend it on, we need to spend it on the park. And so the park has some, what I believe to be some legitimate requests. We can pay for those, and it won't affect our general revenue issue versus our operating expenses. Only the stuff, what's killing us is our general revenue versus our operating expenses. These amounts in these restricted funds can't, the $90,000 we have in the tree fund can't be used to offset fire department equipment for the Quint. If we had just one big account, we could use everything for everything, we would be in really good shape. But we can't. So we have to remember that as we're tightening down on one side, it may or may not serve our purpose to tighten down in other places, because that money can't solve our problem, and all we're doing is hamstringing our operating divisions. That's my point in bringing that up. But I don't, the revenue figures that I offered are conservative. They're not much different than Tom's.
I'd like to review that. That would be good to know.
Tom's basically coming in at 5.1 million, and I'm coming in at 5.2. So it's just $100,000 difference is all I'm talking about, difference. The only thing I'm saying is that we just limit our capital purchases to those areas where we have money in a restricted fund that can be used for that, and that we defer any other capital purchases till we see how it is. And then we basically said, if you had an operating expense account of $10,000 last year and you spent 8 of it, then this year you would get 80% of 8, which you would get $6,400. And you know, by the end of the year, we may be able to give, or by the middle of the year, may be able to give you more. But then you add to that what the finance committee is saying is, okay, you got $6,400 in operating expense to last you an entire year. So how much each quarter should you be spending? You should be spending 1/4 of that, unless you have, you know, some reason that you would have to go over that. And that shouldn't come back to the board, because we've allocated the $8,000 or the $6,400. But what the committee is saying is that's when the city manager or the chief financial officer, and if they want more input into that decision, they can bring it back to the finance committee, and the 4 of us or 5 of us can talk about it. But you basically, in order to ensure the conservatism and that the money will last the entire year, you go to a quarterly spending allocation of your entire year's budget. We don't want to do budget amendments every quarter, but we can implement some management control in those areas that are not going to happen every 2 weeks, like salary. You know, Tom needs to be able to spend salary. So that was, but I'll clean this up and be happy to send it, you know.
Other discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
How much is in our unrestricted in our reserves? I understand how much we have in reserves that are restricted, but unrestricted. So what's our savings account that's not,
So we just have payroll, so I'd say around 150.
so if we go and start spending money on this restricted, which we're not supposed to touch anyway, and because I mean, it's a nice solution on how you get some of this stuff is just having them to come out of their department. But my fear is you start chipping away at these restricted funds for, you know, trucks or buildings or whatever they need to go to, then I just wonder what we're actually going to have in reserves when it's all said and done. If we are doing a budget that is close on projections, because we don't have the line items, we use the 6 months out, with having what we have in our unrestricted reserves, it just seems dangerous to do anything but cut.
I have a question,
Go ahead.
if you're through, Commissioner Carroll. Is TML the only vendor on line item 510?
Is what?
Yes.
Why do we project a 37% increase in that?
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
The question was, is TML the only vendor that we have to carry on item 510, property and liability insurance, and we projected an increase of 37%? That's a lot.
I do have that start also. Didn't know if,
Yeah, that's what our premiums will be, everything as we have right now, which is what I recommend in our current, state. It's kind of like, if you can afford a deductible, you got cash. It happens like a serious, we need their coverage, right now we're covered at 100% with everything. So we've had a lot of claims, more than we had. Of course, I'm over here, but according to TML. Plus, I believe some claims across the board, but pretty much most of our claims are driven by our activities, and we have had quite a bit of workers' comp is a large portion. Our property is not very much, it'll stay about the same. I do want to look at decreasing that, and the only way you can do that is by deductible path, and if you go over a certain amount of claims, then you lose, you're no longer losing money, you're in trouble. So it's kind of a fine line. Right now, if you can't, I feel good about covering the deductible, I've been going that route.
But they've already given you this premium of an increase of 37% for the coming year?
That's their rate,
Their quote. Okay.
straight from TMA.
Okay.
And that's all three, that's the workers' comp,
Property and liability.
liability, and property and liability.
we have 8 minutes of the discussion.
Only thing, and I don't know if this would be appropriate, but I would like to hear from Donna if she could, does anybody mind if, would you mind coming up? Since you're a member of the Finance Committee, I hate to put you on the spot, but I just,
She doesn't mind.
you don't mind? Can you give us your thoughts?
Is he saying I'm opinionated or something? Do y'all actually have access to the actual numbers by month that he would be referring to? I have them here if you want to look at that.
Okay.
It seems to be a pretty reasonable suggestion for the 6 months, because we had some really low months in, it was like 73,000, 65,000, 77,000, and now it's 86,000. So, the spread is pretty good. I think pretty reasonable. And as far as, I probably would be still on the spending freeze pretty much for the next 6 months. And then if we got more money than we had projected, then we could loosen up and have them only spend what they could not do without. We wouldn't want work stoppage or anything like that, but pretty much anything else, no fluff at all.
So pretty much you can see the 6-month suggestion is, and for this next year budget with a spending freeze and just do exactly what
Yeah, what
we
he's
need.
suggesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Thank you for,
Thank you for your
since
service.
you were here, I thought, well, let's get another professional's opinion.
I'm going
I looked at
to make a motion for a special meeting for the June 1st. Due to the workshops not being recorded, we can have the special meetings that will be recorded for public record for June 1st at 5:30 to address the revised draft.
Monday?
I'm sorry, I meant the June 1st meeting, so the date is,
I won't be here. That's why I was gonna say, I'll be here on June the 1st, which is, I think a Sunday. June the 2nd is the Monday, but I won't be here for
Okay.
the first meeting in June.
Might have been telepathy knowing that, hang on.
That might make it easier for y'all.
Anyway, whatever day you want to do.
We
June
do-
5th is the date I was speaking of. June 2nd
We
is
do
the
have, we
Monday.
do have a town hall. This is a
29th?
No, that's the May 29th.
Yeah, that, if we could,
Yeah, but right now, we could set that as, instead of being a town hall, it could be the next budget meeting.
Mr. Jeremy Durham is visiting with us, so he will be a guest, and we can have that as well.
That'd be fine to do both. But the point being that I
Okay,
will be.
7 o'clock on the
I will be
tw-
here on the 29th.
All right, does anyone have
We want to set it at 5:30 or 7 o'clock?
we want to set it at the,
Why don't we meet the budget at 5:30 and then Jerry, the town
Then
hall
they
can
can have their
start
time at 7?
Yeah.
Would that work? That would work for me.
Okay.
me too.
is everybody good with that? My,
Oh,
Y'all go ahead.
When is it?
I've
What?
already announced I won't be here for the town hall either, so
Okay, well, let's do
That's
it at a
fine, 'cause
time
that's
we
when
can all
Lane
be
does
here.
lines up like Buddy Jewel, so.
Okay, well, I mean, you mentioned a Monday is, I mean, we need notice. We could do it, we don't want to do it the 26th, but
6/2 that Monday. I can be here.
That's a holiday, isn't it?
yeah, that's the holiday.
Can
That's
4 of
the
us be
one.
here for the town hall? Because that way we can have the public forum as well, which all that goes together. And if you have anything that you want to express, read, or deliver, we'd be glad to do that in a formal fashion.
Yes, ma'am.
Sounds good.
That's fine.
Okay? Let's keep 7 o'clock the 29th, and we'll be able to present the budget, discuss, and if there's something else, we'll maybe come back around the next week.
Okay, but we're gonna meet at 5:30 on the 29th to do the budget, a special meeting, right?
Special meeting at 5:30,
And then the town hall at 7.
town hall at 7, and we will allow public comments as well.
What would you like the agenda item to be the same as it was tonight?
I need a second first, hold on.
Second.
Okay, in discussion, agenda item being discuss and/or take action on Fairview budget for fiscal year 2014-15.
Just, further review.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for your deliberation and your conversation. It was very fruitful. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Special meeting adjourned. Thank you.